Greetings and welcome to Friday Night Spotlight. I'm your host, Dr. Samuel Hampton II, and you know how we do it right here on the Friday Night Spotlight show. I actually lean on in. Get ready for great conversation with stimulating people who are doing outstanding things locally and beyond. And on tonight, we have that type of show for you with two outstanding guests. So I'm excited to have Chief Jack Hall with us and sujeiry coll with us on tonight. How y'all doing on tonight?
Doing great tonight. Thank you for asking.
Good. Chief, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Jack Coll. I've been a 30-year law enforcement professional in Northeastern Ohio. Started my career out in Lorain County in Sheffield. Was way smaller back then than it is now. Moved over to Avon Lake after spending a few years in Sheffield Village. Became the detective sergeant. Had several white-collar crimes. Actually got certified in homicide investigations, sexual assault investigations, and then had the opportunity to take the position of captain of special operations with the Cleveland Metro Parks Police Department. That was probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had in law enforcement due to the variety of things that we investigated. Spent about a decade there, and then I was graciously asked and took the opportunity to go down to Medina County for the private sector for Westfield Bank and Westfield Insurance to actually start their police department for Westfield. So had been doing that, and now I'm running for Lorain County Sheriff in 2024.
So we got so much stuff to talk about in this law enforcement arena as we see the times that we're in. So so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in law enforcement for 8 years now. I was with the Lorain County Sheriff Department at one point, and I left there as a detective, which I investigated like sex crimes, theft, a lot of other stuff, and human trafficking. Now I have my own business, and I work part-time for Sheffield Village Police Department and Wellington Police Department.
So now since y'all have all this extensive background in law enforcement, tell me, what would you say is the most rewarding or the most challenging piece of law enforcement?
Rewarding for me is easy.
Okay.
Being able to help people in the community, victims, and when it comes to sexual assault, human trafficking, being their voice. I love being their voice. I love being in court and being able to speak for them and help them overcome whatever tragic that happens in their life. That is very rewarding for me.
What would you say most challenging?
Challenging is sometimes I have a little bit of hard time with the court system, the way it operates nowadays. The community not trusting us and seeing us as something different than what we're there to do. Like sometimes we could be seen enemies when we're not. So I find that piece very difficult and challenging. But when I go out there, I try to make, contact with the community, talk to people, and show them that I'm human too, and that I like my community and that I like helping them.
I think that's one of the things that people, when we automatically start talking about law enforcement, and Chief, jump on in here, that people would say, the community looks at it like, well, I know you're supposed to be protecting and serving us, but it doesn't seem like that. And then just like you said, one of the challenges is the court system. And I know a lot of community people, members and families are saying like the court system is a major issue. That is a broken system. And so when you think about that, that becomes a challenge that we have to work through, even though, as you said, there's some rewarding things of being the voice for the community. Come on, what about yourself?
I'm going to start with the challenge. And as Sue said, when we talk about the challenge and the way the community looks at us, as far as you said, the job that we have to do. New Zealand a few years ago did a great study, and they did a promotional program in New Zealand and recruiting police officers for the New Zealand Police Department. And they had this funny little commercial on YouTube that went viral with over nearly or 500,000 hit or 1.5 million hits. And it all started off with you're seeing this officer in a chase after somebody. And each officer, it's a tactical officer, it's a regular patrol officer, and at the end of this video, it ends up being a dog that they're chasing. And the officer tells the dog to sit down, the dog spits a purse out of its mouth on there. And so what they're trying to say is that we all know what the job is in law enforcement, to protect and to serve the community. And I think a lot of times too is what Sue said, when the community looks at us as human beings, is that the community understands what the job is, but do they understand the officers and who they are that comprise that job? And the biggest thing that worries me now, I think we're all familiar with the Gallup poll organization. Gallup poll after Watergate, which actually I think this is the 50th year
50th
anniversary of Watergate, they started tracking America's feelings about government, Congress, the military, etc. And in 1993, Gallup poll broke a specific category out for law enforcement, and that was after the Rodney King trial had taken place in Los Angeles. And so therefore, for years and years, we have been rated by the American public as in right up there with the military, high 80, low 90% that the favorability rate of America to law enforcement was looking at us. Unfortunately, April of this year, we dropped below 50% on the Gallup poll for the first time ever. 48% approval rating by Americans of police work.
Wow.
And unfortunately, police work, when we're supposed to be serving and supporting all the community, we have the widest disparity between Black Americans and white Americans. And even white Americans don't approve of how we're doing the job. And so, like Sue said, when we look at how we are viewed by the public, our own people that we're serving, our own people that we have to build that trust with in the community, we haven't been doing a very good job lately of that. And that's the biggest challenge. And I agree, the successes are in making sure that when you see people that they have nowhere else to go, they have nobody else to turn to. We want to be those people. We want to be that service to make sure that we are helping those who were paid to help. And right now, the American public doesn't see us as those guardians of.
But let's talk about that though, because before we did not see the stories that we see today, right? Because we didn't have phones, we didn't have cameras on our phones. We weren't able to get pulled over by the police and then start filming them. We didn't see all these. How do you feel social media has impacted that Gallup poll and the view that we have when you have one-off situations that now we're made to seem like this is everyday occurrences?
It has been very negative for us. Very negative. And a lot of the times also when they show only one portion of the video and not the whole video of how it started and ended, it hurts us. Instead of the media working with us and making the community aware that we're humans and that we're doing our job the best we can. Now, mind you, there's a lot of bad apples in every profession. I'm not gonna lie, we have bad apples everywhere. Teachers, construction workers, people that work at hotels, we have bad apples everywhere. However, when I go out there, I want to do my job the best I can. I want to protect and serve my community, and I don't want to hurt anyone. Because if I hurt somebody, that stays in my mind. You understand? It stays with the person for the rest of their life. We don't want to hurt people. We want to make them safe. So I think the media has taken everything out of proportion and has hurt us as police officers because they only show the side where we're hurting somebody or encountering somebody that is in a violent environment. So it's very difficult for us to show the different side when all they're promoting out there, it's violence that we're supposedly doing on a daily basis when we're not.
I think this is a big matter. It's something that I would love, as you're talking about, Sue, I'd love to hear from you too, Chief, as you're running and looking to be sheriff in Lorain County, these different things, is because social media is not going away. And we're not even talking about just mainstream media. Now we're talking about self-proclaimed journalists or vloggers or bloggers who are now seeing things and then writing about it. So how do you combat that so that you are able to have that successes that you're talking about, the rewards of being in law enforcement? How do you deal with this?
Well, unfortunately, you used the word combat. And I don't like to use that in this context because we're supposed to be working with the community. And in doing this is that my campaign has a slogan called ICE, Inclusion Cultivates Excellence. And when you work with the community and you bring those thought processes in and listen to what they have to say, a gentleman in Elyria told me one time, he brought up, I said, I'm going to steal this from you. He said, community policing doesn't always have to involve the police. And prior to us coming into production on the set today, we were having a conversation about, Sue said, sometimes we don't even know who our neighbors are anymore. And in the old days when we had big porches on the front of our houses and our houses were all closer and a little bit tight-knit, we actually understood who our neighbors were, who we were growing up with. And a matter of fact, I can probably attest to this as well as the rest of us here is that when I was growing up, it didn't even, my parents, of course, would discipline me, but my parents, it was well known that everybody else in the neighborhood could discipline me as well. Today, we get into these situations in which no one wants to be involved with anybody else in the neighborhood, nor do parents want to extend that parenting to friends and neighbors in the neighborhood. So the police are always called in to handle these types of situations. The police are the ones that are always called quickly on the phone to say, this neighbor dispute needs to be resolved. Right. This kid is acting up down the street. And we have not, there's right now, as I said, this distrust of the police, a 48% approval rating by the American public right now. But do we trust each other as neighbors? Do we trust each other as a community? Do we trust each other as having different backgrounds? We sit on this stage here today. All three of us come from very unique and distinct cultural, religious, and different types of socioeconomic backgrounds. But when we look at each other as three of us sitting up here, we have a common thing that we're talking about tonight. Law enforcement reform, being able to work well within the community, being able to develop the trust of the community. And as Sue said, I can't think of any police officers in my mind that have woken up at the beginning of the day and said, I want to get up, go out and hurt somebody, or I want to go out and do a bad job. There's not a police officer that I've ever known in the 32 years of doing this job that woke up and said that. Sometimes we're put into very precarious situations, very dangerous situations, and we have to deal with that on a daily basis. But we also have to make sure that we include the community in building that trust. Different communities have different aspects on how they want to be policed. And I'm not saying is that we allow people to break the law. What I'm saying is that we allow people in their individual neighborhoods, their families, and that have more control in what goes on in their life, and also make them more accountable. And, there was, especially in the Black community, Big Mama, who is the matriarch in the Black community. When I was working in Cleveland, that would be one of the things we would respond to somewhere, and there would be all these people out in the front. You realize it's 2 or 3 different families. One of the first questions we would ask is, where's Big Mama? We're going to go right to the matriarch of the family and have her help us assist this problem, have her be involved in making those decisions. Because a lot of times the police may be responding to something culturally, may be responding to something socioeconomically, may be responding to something with a certain religious background to it that we may not be understand because we weren't trained to understand.
No, that becomes one of those questions, because people will say that, well, what's the training like and how are you being trained? How do you work? Because we know there are major situations. You talked about working in sex crimes. You've done stuff with trafficking and human trafficking situations. And we know there's major situations that I don't want my neighbor handling. I want people who are qualified and trained. So what are you seeing done to make sure that law enforcement officers are being trained in areas to do what you just started talking about?
Mind if I jump in on that real quick?
Go right ahead.
The training and the trust run hand in hand. I did a talk in North Ridgeville a couple months ago, and I put 2 charts up side by side. The one that I told you about, which was the Gallup poll that said, hey, from this year on, the trust in police has dropped and now we're below 50% at 48%. I put another graphic right up over the top of that one. And it starts in the Reagan administration, goes back that far to the 80s. And we see this upkeep, and especially during Clinton, we have the highest amount of money that is spent by the Department of Justice on police training in the history of law enforcement. Then after 9/11, of course, some funds have to be diverted elsewhere. We see this drop that happens. And then unfortunately in the Obama administration, we see a massive drop in training. When you put those 2 charts up right over top of each other, you see the training dollars to state and local law enforcement and the faith of the American public in law enforcement drop at exactly the same rates. So when we talk about training, all right, we all want to get up, and as Sue said, we all want to do the best job that we can do. However, if the state and federal government are not helping local law enforcement agencies. Sue said that she works for Sheffield and Wellington. Both of those are actually average size law enforcement agencies in this country, meaning departments that are about 25 officers or less. That's our average department in the entire country. Departments of 100 or more are very unique and they're very limited. So the training opportunities that are available in larger departments are more readily available than they are in smaller departments. So then it comes down to the dedication and effort of the officers that are working as looking at Sue's resume, she's put herself through a lot of training. She's want to advance. And sometimes some officers just can't afford to do that because some of this training is very expensive. Yeah. And when the state sets the training agenda, one of them, we've been on the topic of human trafficking. Sue had brought that up. You know what the last time is that we received 1 hour of training in human trafficking that was required by the state of Ohio? 2016. Wow. That was the last time that human trafficking was required. If you cut hair, doctor, if you cut hair, you have to, every time that you get your license renewed, you have to go through human trafficking training.
But we're talking about a major area that's going on in human trafficking. You talk about it, the last time was 2016, when we're seeing the numbers continue to increase. So just like you talked about the trust coming down, but we're seeing major crimes increase, that it seems like officers should be being trained not less, but more.
Exactly.
Correct, especially on that topic, because a lot of us, if you don't learn on your own, like as he said before, a lot of us don't have the training to recognize what human trafficking is. So for example, you have a juvenile that ran away, right? We immediately expect or suspect in our heads, well, she ran away with the boyfriend, or he ran away with the girlfriend. It's okay, we'll find them. But little do we know is that they can be trafficked already somewhere in another state, in another country. And it's gonna be even more difficult to find that child. So instead of thinking, they ran away because they wanted to, let's look into why they're missing. Let's put all the efforts in finding that kid before it's too late. Because let's face it, we have human trafficking next door.
Right. I think, as you talked about the average size of police departments, but we're seeing even in those communities, major situations like these sex crimes, the human trafficking, and we're seeing it. So if the state or the federal government doesn't put dollars towards it, then how are we handling these situations? Which again, how do you then trust? Not necessarily saying I'm trusting, my trust in you two are failing, but how do I trust the system when the system is not doing what needs to be done so I can trust it?
We have to have regional relationships, and we have to have law enforcement leaders that are going to forge those regional relationships. For example, we have human trafficking collaboratives in Cuyahoga County, Lake County, Lorain County, Summit County, and they're starting to come together, to work together to be able to solve these crimes, because that person who is taken is going to not just be taken from one side of Wellington to the other, or just from Lorain to Elyria. Right. They're going to be taken from Elyria to Mentor. They're going to be taken from Lorain to Canton. And so therefore we have to make sure that we massage those relationships in a regional sense. And not only that, but as Sue said, if somebody's even taken out of the country, we have relationships. I have one right now with a woman in Uganda who runs an organization, and she's a survivor of human trafficking. It's called Second Chance for Life, is the name of her organization. And so therefore, you have to not only be able to forge these relationships regionally, which for some reason we have a hard time doing this, but we also have to forge these relationships internationally, even at the Sheffield and Wellington Police Department level, because we have to make sure that we can pick up a phone, we can do an instant message, we can reach out to somebody who we have contacts with to say, this child, we may have information, may be coming into your direction. How do you help us? And that's when a community expects that we're supposed to have the training, we're supposed to provide that service. They watch these shows, the FBI, they come in and they do everything within 60 minutes and they recover somebody, or, if more realistic sets in, well, hold on, to be continued to the next episode, and we continue that. But the public expects us, because of television, to have these abilities, and unless you have a few key individuals that have either taken it upon themselves to work hard to build their own resume up to do this, and to have the leadership to bring all of these law enforcement agencies together, we're not servicing the public at the rate and role they expect us to.
So that's why I want you to take some time and talk to us about it, because as Jack brings that up, the television and the media on this side, the way it looks to us, as you saw about FBI Most Wanted, FBI International, and all these great shows that people get love. Talk to us though, what would be your things? You say, hey, as the community, those who are watching us on tonight, you would say, hey, these are the things that you can do to be aware of what may be going on around you, as we are looking to see the police and law enforcement work together also on their end.
So for like the community, is that what you mean? I mean, there's a lot of signs that you could look at when it comes to human trafficking. Believe it or not, a lot of these girls, boys, or men are tattooed with a certain like barcode or a certain design specific for whoever the pimp or the trafficker, design, or he think that his signature. So he likes to put the signature on the victim. Look at how skinny they are. They don't make eye contact with you. They're very afraid. They're like fragile. The girls a lot of the times will have like bruises or cuts, and usually they don't allow the victim to speak. So for example, if you're a hairdresser and you have a young girl that's being, they're doing their hair and stuff like that, normally the pimp controls everything that's being done. That girl's not allowed to say anything. She's not allowed to say how she wants her hair to be dyed, what length, anything. He controls and says everything he wants to be done on that child or female, whoever he has in front of him. So those are things that you could look at the houses. A lot of the houses are boarded, like you don't see in. Everything is closed. You never see anything. You're never able to like stand in front of the house and see through the window. Like my house, you could see through the window during the day because my curtains are open. A lot of these houses are like very close. You don't see a lot of movement besides females coming in and out or things of that nature, or a lot of male traffic. So those are the easiest things that you can look at to know whether or not a person is in danger.
When you talk about this, and Chief, talk to us about this, because I like what Sue said. It does cause us to come back to another issue that you mentioned earlier, is the awareness or relationship with those I live with, in my neighborhood, community. And I know a lot of people are trying to talk about how do we build this community, because I need to have awareness, because back in the day, neighbors knew, hey, I was leaving for vacation, you letting your neighbor know, I'm gonna be gone. And they check and see, hey, Sam, somebody stopped by your house or whatever. But now we're just kind of in silos. So how do we build that? If we know these major situations are going on, how do we reestablish that community?
One, it's as simple as when Sue said, this is what the house looks like. This is strange behavior that's happening in the neighborhood. You have to pick up the phone and call. Through my entire 3-decade career, I've heard so many times, well, I didn't want to call 911 or I didn't want to call dispatch because I didn't want to bother you guys. I didn't want to bother the police. And I would always say, well, this is our job.
Right.
Pick up the phone, call us, make that phone call and report the strange behavior that's going on. Because even if it is nothing, and everything that Sue said, there's probably parents at home saying, well, that's how my kid acts now. Right. All right, but make the call, because we would rather err on the side of caution, of having a brief investigation done, looking into these types of things. And we don't get involved in anything anymore. And we used to joke back in the day when I was in charge of the Detective Bureau in Avon Lake, we had this weekly newspaper called the Avon Lake Press, and it came out every day on Wednesday. So on the weekend, something would happen, a bunch of cars would get broken into, somebody's house got burglarized, whatever. We would get no phone calls. The officers would canvass the neighborhood. Wednesday, we would all wait in the office because the Avon Lake Press came out on Wednesday. Somebody read it in the Avon Lake Press and the calls started coming in on Wednesday, not on the weekend when all of these things were happening, because they read it in the local little newspaper. Oh, I saw this happen. And we would always get so frustrated. Well, if you saw it happen, where were you early Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and call us then? We need to get more into a spirit of community and being inclusive and getting involved and wanting to report these things. Worst case scenario, if it's just a teenager which is having a bad day, fine, it's a teenager having a bad day, but somebody cared because they saw the signs of something going on to make that call in the first place.
And then that kid will be safe.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't wait until the end to report something when it's too late. We can't wait for that. We have to make, decisions right away. Help people. Care about people, care about your neighbor. If you have an elderly neighbor next door and you don't see her coming out, hey, just call us, give us a call. We'll come and check just to make sure she's fine. Or if you see a child alone walking the streets, just let us know. How many times we see 4-year-old, 3-year-old walking by themselves and nobody stopped to check on the child. They assume it's because they live in that neighborhood and a lot of kids run around that child is doing the same thing. But it's kind of young for that child to be out there by himself. Just stop and check or give us a call. That's what we're here for, like he said. We're there 24/7, and we don't have any issues going out and double checking, just to make sure somebody's okay.
I like how both of you made that point, be engaged. You know, make that phone call, make that announcement, let somebody else know, hey, don't take it for granted what you saw, get involved. And I know sometimes, again, we talking about we're gonna build this trust and getting to know the officer as a person who is also doing this, who cares. And so it is me then being engaged, and because I care about my community, then I wanna share that and talk to them. So we almost done, running out of time. Real quick, Chief, so gotta give Sue some time too, because we're coming to the end. Real quick, what would be your final words to those if you're talking about building this trust that we see?
I think the biggest thing is, as we described before, it's inclusion, and inclusion cultivates excellence. We have to listen, the community has to listen, and we have to be working together to come to this common goal of building the trust between the community and law enforcement. Because I think the community does understand there's over 900 police departments in the state of Ohio, and you have a tremendous amount of people that care about each and every one of you. And we have to understand that you see us as the person as we care.
Yeah.
I agree on that. I mean, building relationship, I think, is the crucial thing right now, so that the community knows that we're there for them. If I'm driving my cruiser, hey, wave. Just don't sit in that cruiser and don't say hi to people. A lot of times, not all the fingers will go up, but a lot of the times, all the fingers will go up and say, they will wave at you. So, like, I work at the Lorraine County Sheriff Department. A lot of people don't wave at me with all the fingers up.
Right.
But I do have in Wellington, Sheffield, that they do it. Just be there. Yeah. And if they don't wave with all the fingers, at least you did what you thought it was right. You're trying to approach the person and be part of the community and show that you're human too.
I love it. So we got to make sure we build this relationship. Well, I thank you, Jack. Thank you, Sue, for being with us on today.
Thank you for having us.
And I thank you, each and every one of you that tuned in on tonight, being with us as we've had a candid conversation. There's so much more we probably could get in and talk about, but there's things that's been shared that you're hearing from our guests on tonight about the importance of building relationship and building community, because we can't have a better world if we're not made to make commitments to be better as individuals. Well, until next time, I want to keep encouraging you. Stay tuned to what's going on here on Friday Night Spotlight. Let somebody else know, because what we're hearing will help them too.